I found out my wife Ellie has been fooling around, confronted her, and guess what? She claims it was just some harmless online flirting, but I dug up a whole saga of texts between her and an old high school buddy, Mark, who she stumbled back in touch with a few weeks back. These messages, they spill the beans on at least 3 secret rendezvous. And if that ain't enough, she's been boasting to her pals about her escapades with him. I put her on the spot, and she just melted down, sobbing up a storm, swearing it was all just a virtual game. Spun me a yarn about how I pushed her into this because I haven't been all that attentive. Truth be told, our bedroom's been pretty cold, given my low drive and all. And get this, I do practically everything around the house, look after the kids, and haven't shared a bed with her for ages since she prefers snuggling up with the kiddos. Somehow she twists it to make me the bad guy, says I'm to blame. She even threw in my face how she stuck by me when I was reckless with our finances and had us borrowing cash from her dad. Not to mention, I had a spell when I was sorting out my sexuality. I thought maybe I was bisexual. Does that stack up to her betrayal? She uses all this to guilt-trip me into sticking around in this sham of a marriage. We've been down the therapy road before. I'm not the best at opening up, and she shuts down any counselor who doesn't sing her tune. Wanted them to fix me, but clammed up the second she was in the hot seat. Ended our last heart-to-heart with her steamrolling over me, even suggesting I talk to her so-called friend for the real story. So here I am, trying to figure out what's real and what's not, all while she insists it's all just make-believe. Maybe we do need another round with a counselor, but who's to say it won't end up the same? Soon after, I discovered from Ellie's texts that she was scheming with both her so-called fair partner and one of her girlfriends, trying to get them to vouch for her, to claim it was all just a fantasy. I printed out every damning word she texted to him. Why in the world would she use text to set up such a deceit? I haven't yet thrown this in her face, but it sure paints a grim picture for any hope of fixing things between us. We even tried to patch things up with some makeup sex, but I was so haunted by her messages that I just couldn't perform. The thought of reconciliation was fading fast, and I was about ready to walk out. Then came her tearful plea, pulling me back in. But finding out she was plotting cover stories, that just blew the lid off any trust left. I'm torn up over what to do next. She's the breadwinner. We've got the house, the kids. And me? I'm just a dad who needs to know he can see his kids at least half the time. I worry my modest income might jeopardize that. Last straw? Well, despite claiming she wanted to mend things, Ellie contacted her fling, suggesting they meet up one last time before she returned to the office. Guess what? He turned her down, saying it was a bad idea. Now she's bitter about being rejected by both of us. Can you believe it? But before you go calling me a pushover, know this. My resolve is only solidifying. I'm meeting with lawyers next week. Should I even confront her again? I've lost all hope. And just today, she tried to justify her actions by saying her doctor backed her up, saying she had no choice but to cheat. She even complained to her doctor that I've been talking to my dad about this mess. Her doctor thinks I'm in the wrong for that. Can you believe it? My dad is practically my only confidant in this town, aside from one buddy who's sympathetic but doesn't get too deep. Who else am I supposed to turn to? Everyone around knows our business because Ellie never stops airing our dirty laundry. We even had a huge fight years back about her sharing our troubles with friends, including a mutual one. Made me feel like a fool among my own circle, since they all heard my problems from her side, minimizing my feelings as always. She tells me to calm down, to just get over it. But I'm beyond furious now, shaking with anger. What's left to do? This has descended into an absolute circus of manipulation and deceit. Just when I thought I had seen it all, Ellie managed to pass a polygraph test. She practically shoved the phone into my hands with a mix of triumph and anger because I had dared to doubt her. The examiner, with a tone that felt a bit too rehearsed, informed me she had passed with flying colors. Despite his assurances, something deep inside told me it was all smoke and mirrors. I couldn't help but confront her, stating flatly that it still reeked of deceit. Furious, she stormed off and locked herself in our bedroom, frantically texting her friends, likely seeking advice on her next manipulative move. Even with the polygraph supposedly in her favor, the lingering doubts haunt me. There are simply too many inconsistencies in her story and in the texts for me to brush aside. But now, this polygraph result has thrown a wrench into the works, complicating any straightforward narrative of guilt. Curious and frustrated, I've been digging into the effectiveness of polygraphs and unearthing the truth about infidelity. Ellie remains steadfast in her denial, leveraging the absence of photographic evidence of her affair to maintain a sliver of plausible deniability. Desperate to clear her name, she proposed the polygraph as a definitive proof of her fabricated innocence. Skeptically, I agreed, though I've always regarded polygraphs as more akin to a circus trick, a gimmick straight out of a tacky reality TV scenario. Her initial polygraph returned an inconclusive result, which didn't surprise me given her anxious disposition. I later found out she had taken lorazepam, obtained from a so-called supportive coworker, likely to dampen her nerves and skew the results. They offered a free retest due to the inconclusive outcome, and that's when I discovered she had secured more of the same pills. Deciding to intervene, I secretly replaced the lorazepam in her purse with similar-looking vitamin pills. I'm curious to see how she fares in the retest without her pharmaceutical crutch. Throughout this entire ordeal, she has not shown a single genuine moment of remorse. Instead, she continues to deflect and blame me for everything. Just today, she spitefully told me that she's glad I feel betrayed and hurt. Perhaps now, she said, I would understand what it's like to be in her shoes. Each word out of her mouth only solidifies my resolve to end this farce once and for all. I've already begun taking steps for my own healing and future. I've scheduled some individual counseling sessions for myself and enlisted the help of a lawyer. Regardless of the outcome of the upcoming retest, my decision is firm. I am done. After a particularly volatile argument earlier today, the day we got the polygraph results, and I voiced my skepticism, she took the kids and left for a few hours. She later texted me, tauntingly explaining that she wanted me to feel the pain of being without my family, as she had been. It's painfully clear she's not above using our children as leverage in her twisted games. Throughout this ordeal, I've been forced to recognize just how manipulative Ellie can be. Despite the advice and concern from friends and strangers alike about my perceived passiveness, she continues to adamantly deny any physical relationship with her affair partner, clinging stubbornly to her narrative of a non-line-only affair. But after everything I've endured, the clearer picture has emerged. It's time for me to close this chapter and begin anew, free from the tangled web of lies she's woven. I never was one to lash out, to swear or yell or call names, but Ellie, she's managed to do all that to me. And to make matters worse, I decided to give her the silent treatment, gray rocker, for a whole week. I even took to sleeping in the basement to keep my distance. Her response? She accused me of treating her horribly. Can you believe that? I was just trying to protect myself, and yet she twisted it to play the victim, continuing to blame me for everything. She even made me the butt of all jokes at her workplace. Despite claiming it was over, she was still in touch with her affair partner until last Friday. Even when she texted him to end it, she said it was only for a while. No, it's supposed to be permanent, but she doesn't seem to get it. She's been maintaining all along that since their fling was mostly online, it wasn't really a relationship. Yet just this Friday, she posted on Facebook about missing someone important, clearly not referring to me. Later, I learned from her friends that she's been missing him terribly. If it wasn't a real relationship, why the heartache? Her co-workers are even scheming to reconnect them via email or other means. It's nowhere near over. Last week brought another shocker. Through a co-worker, she admitted she had lied on the polygraph. She even joked about being so good at lying that she could rob a bank and still pass a lie detector test. She confessed to being so doped up on lorazepam that she couldn't even remember driving back to work that day. She's also been spreading word that her affair partner is eager to reignite their affair, especially in his truck, a fantasy of hers they never got to fulfill. Apparently, he's playing the good guy, suggesting they hold off until she and I patch things up. Then she had the gall to write me a letter, blaming me yet again, and even suggesting I'd like the guy if I met him, as if I'd want to do anything but knock his lights out. I was so fed up that I left my wedding ring on the bathroom counter last week. She found it and wouldn't stop nagging me about it while I cooked dinner. Worn down, I put it back on. Then this Friday, she came home in tears after I'd texted her about the toll her actions were taking on me. Maybe, just maybe, she started to realize the mess she'd caused. She actually acknowledged my feelings for once, which softened me a bit, but my resolve hasn't changed. I just wanted the arguing to end, and I lacked the assertiveness to just tell her to get lost. So, after a 3-hour walk to clear my head, I let her back in, just a little. We even agreed to start marriage counseling this week. Honestly, I don't want to go. Since I've let her in again, she's already begun to invalidate my feelings, trying to persuade me that what she did wasn't so bad. It's a vicious cycle, and I'm caught up in it, still struggling to find the strength to say enough is enough. It just keeps spinning in circles. Her insisting what she did doesn't count as a real relationship. She believes if I could just accept that, all my stress would disappear. It's supposedly that simple. I had a pretty insightful session last week with a therapist who works in the same office where we're set to begin our marriage counseling. She was really supportive, affirming my doubts and subtly hinting that maybe I deserve better. She didn't outright suggest divorce, but the implication was clear. The marriage counseling will be with a different therapist, but in the same office, which gives me a sliver of hope that they might share similar views and might be able to see through Ellie's manipulations. I know Ellie's gunning for an open marriage. That's her endgame with this counseling. My plan is to lay everything out in the open during the sessions and reinforce my inclination towards divorce. Having a professional mediator might give me the strength to assert my position more firmly. I'm aware that many of you aren't in favor of marriage counseling, given the circumstances. And honestly, I'm nervous about it too. It feels like a gamble. I've also got a lawyer on retainer now. His advice was to start with a mutually agreed separation agreement, which tends to lead to less conflict than going straight for divorce. It's a slow process, but as a low-income earner with 3 kids, I'm inclined to take his advice for now, depending on how Ellie responds and the type of lawyer she chooses. I'm in the process of gathering the necessary documents to get started on this. Emotionally, I've been a bit more stable than last week, but the anxiety and disgust resurface every time I'm near her, making me retreat to long walks in the evenings just to escape. I'm back at work, which offers some distraction, but sleeping next to her is another battle, especially since she's already pressuring me for sex again. That's a hard no from me. The worst part is battling feelings of worthlessness and even suicidal thoughts, which terrify me. I couldn't ever act on them, not and leave my kids. But sometimes, when I'm driving on bald tires, I catch myself wishing for an accident. I'm utterly miserable, and she acts as if nothing's wrong. It's revolting. The notion that it's better for kids to come from a broken home than to live in one has become painfully relevant. Thankfully, there haven't been any major blowouts at home or in front of the kids. My youngest 2, 8 and 5, seem oblivious, though I'm sure they sense the tension. My eldest, however, is more perceptive. He even asked Ellie if we were heading for divorce after she took them out last week to show me what life without my family would be like. She told him no, but it's clear she's more concerned about her image at work than her standing with her family. Last night, during our marriage counseling session, Ellie tried to justify her actions by diminishing the significance of her affair. She argued that a few weeks of texting, though I'm convinced it was more than that, didn't amount to cheating. The counselor was taken aback and challenged her perspective. Then Ellie shifted the blame onto me, bringing up my use of porn, which she equates to infidelity. She's always disliked it, but now she's using it against me, claiming we've both been unfaithful and should just move on. I've discussed my porn habits with a counselor before, who didn't consider it an addiction. My usage is moderate, just a few times a week for a few minutes each session. According to him, addiction involves compulsive behavior that significantly disrupts one's life, which doesn't apply in my case. But in our counseling session, the new counselor suggested that any porn use could be seen as infidelity, giving Ellie ammunition to claim we're equally at fault. I've never lied about my porn usage. Ellie herself has even incorporated it into our intimate life in the past. It's baffling that she's now labeling it as betrayal, simply because it suits her narrative. I confronted her about lying on the polygraph, hinting that someone in her office has been leaking information to me. She was furious last night and demanded to see my phone this morning, suspecting I was communicating with the informant. I refused. Since then, her tone has changed drastically. She's been sending me all these sweet messages, proclaiming her love and twisting the narrative about her conversation with her coworker regarding the polygraph. It's confusing and feels like just another manipulation. To add insult to injury, I recently discovered that she's resumed contact with her affair partner, this time using a coworker's phone. It makes me wonder, how can viewing porn sporadically compare to her actively sexting another man over a prolonged period? Am I just overreacting, or is this yet another of her manipulative tactics? Today, I stumbled upon a notebook where Ellie had been writing a side-by-side comparison of me and her affair partner, literally listing our traits and qualities as if weighing us against each other. It's a stark reminder that in her mind, I'm just her second choice, her plan B. In her notes, Ellie lists why she thinks her affair partner is superior, 12 traits to my 6. Sure, I'm the better-looking one, and I do all the chores, cook, clean, and I'm a devoted father. He, on the other hand, has a manly job, earns well, drives a rugged truck, and according to her, they share intense, passionate sex. It stings to read, making it seem like what we had has faded into nothing but complacency after 16 years of marriage. It's clear she's caught up in the honeymoon phase with him. Here I am, just a librarian and a former soldier. Apparently to her and her friends, being a male librarian suggests I'm less of a man, maybe even gay, as if my profession defines my masculinity. Alongside these comparisons, she's written what sounds like lovesick teenage poetry about how he makes her feel alive and fills the void. But it's obvious he's only interested in the physical side, not a real relationship. That leaves me as the fallback guy. The second choice if her lover ever wanted more, she'd be gone in a heartbeat. But since he doesn't, she's suddenly interested in working on us. But is there even anuses left to work on? She's even started to make me question my role as a father. She's jealous of the time I spend with our kids, especially my daughter. They're just children, 11, 8, and 5, naturally seeking attention from their dad, but Ellie resents this, accusing me of favoring them over her. I suppose this is just a rant, but here's the latest. Up until last Friday, I was set on divorce. That evening, after we both had individual sessions with our marriage counselor, I declared that I was done with the marriage. The counselor didn't offer much support, only agreeing that an open marriage wouldn't work. I explained that for any chance of reconciliation, her affair partner and the enabling friends would have to be completely out of the picture. Ellie's session followed 2 days later. She started by bringing the counselor a bouquet of flowers, her usual manipulative ploy. She returned home claiming her session went very well, that the counselor even justified her affair and advised maintaining contact with her lover. I was livid, told her off, and spent the night in the basement. The next morning she came down, tears in her eyes, running her usual guilt trip about me giving up on our marriage. It's exhausting, feeling like no matter what I do, it's never enough for her. She continues to live in a delusion where her actions are defensible, and I'm just supposed to accept them and move on. Despite the chaos, I somehow found myself agreeing to work on our relationship. But nothing substantive has changed in Ellie's narrative, or her attitude towards what has transpired. She continues to insist that both of us are at fault for infidelity, claiming my actions drove her to her affair. The weekend passed by deceptively peaceful until Sunday evening when Ellie dropped a bombshell. She expressed a desire to meet her affair partner for drinks on Wednesday to ask some questions. I was far from pleased with this idea, but she justified it by saying the marriage counselor had endorsed this contact, framing him as a good support system. This seemed preposterous, but I reluctantly thought, perhaps this would finally expose her true motives. My suspicion is that her hesitation to push for a divorce is influenced by her status as the higher earner. I've come across texts from her coworkers sending her job postings for me, which she innocently claims are intended to help us, meaning the two of us. Yet, the context clearly indicates that us refers to her and her colleagues. It appears she might be aiming to get me a better-paying job to reduce her potential child support obligations should we separate. On Thursday, Ellie returned home late from work, claiming a colleague's significant announcement was the cause. However, her phone's location history betrayed her, showing she had stopped at his house. She explained she had merely dropped off a letter because he wasn't home, but the mystery of the letter's contents has me concerned. She's discussed it extensively with her friends and hinted to her affair partner that the ball is now in your court, suggesting it was a last-ditch effort to prompt him into a more serious commitment. Her deeper feelings for him are more apparent than she admits. Despite claiming that her sappy love poetry about him was meaningless, her actions suggest otherwise. This week, she specifically requested he send her pictures of himself in his coveralls. Bizarrely, she has now started asking me to wear coveralls during our intimate moments. Her taste in music has also undergone a drastic transformation. Previously, she would immediately switch the station if I turned on any hard rock or metal, but now she's avidly listening to Nine Inch Nails and Five Finger Death Punch, bands she had never shown any interest in before. These shifts in her behavior, her secretive communications, and sudden changes in taste are not merely coincidental. They clearly reflect her deeper, unspoken feelings and desires, which she masks with superficial gestures of reconciliation towards me. The stark contrast between her words and her actions is disorienting and leaves me pondering the true state of our marriage and contemplating what my next step should be. The mental energy Ellie dedicates to this guy surpasses anything resembling just friendship. I've tried genuinely to meet her halfway this week, making efforts based on what she claimed she wanted to see from me. Yet, within 2 days, she was back in contact with her affair partner, trying to swing from him back to me, a behavior often referred to as monkey branching. So far, he hasn't responded to her letter. Over the weekend, she discovered one of the spyware apps I had installed on her phone and removed it, but thankfully, I have redundancies in place. As far as reconciliation goes, my feelings for her have significantly cooled. There's still some love there, but it's nowhere near what it once was. I find myself constantly anxious and tense around her, despite my efforts to engage. It's clear she's not fully invested, though she's quite skilled at pretending, something you might expect from someone who's cheated. Right now, the main reasons I'm even considering reconciliation are the kids and the financial implications. While I might be able to scrape by on my own given my modest income, it would be tight. This marriage feels like it's on a countdown to its end, but at least I can tell my kids I tried, even if my commitment feels more obligatory than heartfelt. I'm still quietly preparing for a possible divorce, gathering necessary documents, which is tricky since I need some from Ellie. Her friends have painted me in a bad light, suggesting I could be sneaky or even dangerous. To preempt any false accusations, I've moved my firearms off-site to ensure they can't be used as a pretext for evicting me or obtaining a restraining order against me. I also need to meet with a mortgage broker to understand what I could potentially qualify for in terms of housing. To complicate matters further, her father has been giving her archaic advice about divorce and custody. He's convinced her that I would be entitled to nothing, not even shared custody of our kids or any equity in our home, echoing his own experiences from a divorce in 1979. They believe her grounds for full custody would be my low income and a supposed PTSD from my time in Afghanistan, which is absurd since I've never been diagnosed or treated for PTSD. These discussions have stirred a deep well of self-doubt and diminished self-worth within me. The looming threat of an accusation of violence is distressing. At moments, I feel overwhelmed by dark thoughts, regretting that I haven't been more assertive in telling her it's over. Instead, I find myself caught in a cycle of concession and despair, grappling with the realization that this situation might only worsen. I feel like a fool. Even though I confronted Ellie directly, telling her that I can't fully accept her story about the texts, how perfectly composed they were, too crafted to seem genuine, I still find myself swayed by her manipulations. She's adept at sowing seeds of doubt, and I hate that I've let her get under my skin this way. Recently, her affair partner responded to her letter, decisively ending things. He stated that he felt too entangled and uncomfortable with the situation, and even expressed empathy, suggesting Ellie should stop dragging me along. I caught glimpses of other messages where her friends lamented that her white knight wasn't coming to rescue her. Last night, she confessed that he had ended things and suggested I should be relieved. When I pressed her about the content of the letter, she claimed it was merely inquiries about divorce procedures, since he'd been through it himself. However, the narrative doesn't hold. Her conversations with friends and his farewell message hint at more. When I demanded to see the letter, she offered to send an electronic copy. True to my suspicions, when I received it and checked the file's properties and version history, it was clear she had drafted it just that morning, containing only the details she'd previously acknowledged. The deception was palpable, leaving me to wonder how she thought she could pull off such an obvious ruse. On top of all this, Ellie consistently fails to acknowledge any of my contributions or support, especially when talking to her friends. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, her father was suddenly hospitalized. While she discovered his place in disarray and was understandably upset, I was the one who called around to local hospitals, eventually locating him. Yet the next day, she told her friends that she was the one who found him, completely omitting my involvement. This pattern repeated just recently after a major snowfall. She was trapped in our driveway, unable to leave. I spent hours shoveling us out, but later, I overheard her bragging on the phone about how she had managed to clear the snow herself. Every effort I make seems to vanish in her narratives, replaced by stories where she is the sole protagonist. It's a continual erasure of my efforts and emotions, and I'm left feeling invisible in my own marriage. This selective recounting of events to her friends not only undermines me, but also isolates me further within our shared social circles. How can I continue in a partnership where my role is consistently diminished and my efforts unacknowledged? The sense of betrayal deepens with each of these incidents, reinforcing my doubts about the viability of this relationship. After a heavy snowfall, Ellie got stuck halfway down our driveway. She woke me to help push her car back into the garage, and I spent the next 45 minutes clearing the driveway of snow. However, when recounting the story to her friends, she completely omitted my efforts, claiming instead that she managed to handle the car herself and that it took 3 men 2 hours to clear all the snow. I have no idea who these 3 men are supposed to be. This ongoing pattern of dismissing my contributions only serves to aggravate me further, making it seem like she's crafting a narrative to justify her actions and portray me negatively to her friends. On top of this, she's been nagging me to change her snow tires and the oil in her car, tasks I've been reluctant to tackle. The last time I worked on her car, I changed the brakes and rotors, only for her to use the car to drive to her affair partner's place for dinner, and subsequently, an intimate encounter, something she later admitted, having previously lied that she was dining with a friend. The car has become a trigger for me, a symbol of her betrayal, and I find myself increasingly unwilling to do anything for it. These ongoing issues, her persistent blame shifting, and her lack of transparency with her phone are eroding what little hope remains for reconciliation. My heart just isn't in it anymore, and each day I grow more miserable. In addition to these domestic conflicts, there's also tension surrounding my individual therapy sessions. Ellie exhibits considerable anxiety whenever I have an appointment. She bombards me with questions both before and after my sessions, eager to know if I talked about her and becoming upset if I don't share the details. This has made me uncomfortable, as our discussions do involve her, and not always in a positive light. I find myself torn between the privacy I believe these sessions should have and not wanting to keep secrets from her. This dynamic came to a head recently when she sent me a message that left me utterly perplexed. Without any context or apology for her ongoing behavior, the message was cryptic and unsettling. I'm at a loss on how to respond or whether it's even worth engaging. Normally, I would discuss this with my counselor, but my next session isn't for another month. I'm desperate for some insight or advice on how to handle this situation. She shows no remorse. Her last session with our marriage counselor confirmed as much, when she openly admitted she felt no guilt. I'm struggling to discern what her intentions are, what this cryptic message could mean, and how to cope with the ongoing deceit and manipulation. I've been stewing over how to confront you face to face, but I just can't seem to find the words, so I'll say it here instead. I am furious, disappointed, and deeply hurt by how you've treated me. You've become the kind of emotional abuser I never imagined possible from you. I wasn't the one who slept with someone else, became your go-to response no matter the evidence I provided, which would have convinced even law enforcement or a court. Your constant accusations that I cheated, despite all proof to the contrary, have left me enraged. Maybe I should have just cheated, since you've made up your mind about me anyway. What I need from you is an apology for the harsh words, for relentlessly accusing me of something I never did, and for lying about your actions. I'll acknowledge the sexting, just as you admit to watching porn, but I can't move past my anger until I receive a genuine apology from you. Update. As expected, our attempts at reconciliation have failed. Feel free to say, "I told you so." Over the weekend, we celebrated our daughter's birthday, and my wife posted about it on Facebook. Her affair partner commented on the post, which reignited their communication. She informed me that he had messaged her, but she was evasive about the details, claiming it was innocent chatter about our daughter's age. However, her behavior regressed to how it was last summer during her affair. She's been inseparable from her phone, responding to messages instantly and carrying it with her constantly around the house. She hasn't let me see her phone, but she doesn't know I figured out her PIN. Her choices are always predictable. Their messages have gotten flirty, referencing their past encounters, though nothing outright incriminating. He mentioned he'd be home Monday and Tuesday due to bad weather. His job requires him to work outdoors. Curiously, Monday night, after the kids were in bed, she decided to dye her hair, even though she had just done so before Christmas. It struck me as odd, especially since she's working from home now. Who is she trying to impress? She spent over an hour in the bathroom grooming herself. When I went to bed at 11:30 p.m. and asked if I could come in to wash up, she only cracked the door to hand me my toothbrush, saying coyly, "I'm getting ready for you." Right, sure. Considering the affair partner has the next day off, I couldn't shake the suspicion about her late-night grooming session. So, Tuesday morning, before heading to work, I reset the trip odometer in her car. This way, I could easily check if she went anywhere during the day. It's a sad state of affairs, having to track your spouse like this, but her actions leave me no choice. I need to know the truth, however painful it might be. As I left for work, Ellie was in her usual sweats, sitting in front of the computer. Midday, she texted me, saying she planned to take a nap during lunch. However, when I returned home from work, I found that she had changed into a low-cut shirt and applied a full face of makeup. When I inquired about the sudden change, particularly the revealing shirt, she deflected my question. I thought perhaps she'd dressed up to take our son to his evening activity, as she usually spends time at a nearby bar while he's occupied. But after dinner, she switched back into a different long-sleeve sweatshirt. Puzzled by the earlier attire, I checked the car and saw an extra 5.5 kilometers on the trip counter. She hadn't mentioned going out, so I probed about her day, but she offered no explanation. Given the distance and her history, I suspected she might have met someone for lunch, possibly at a restaurant that's about 2.5 kilometers away, plus a bit more to pick up her affair partner, who, distressingly, lives uncomfortably close to us. My suspicions, however, only partially aligned with the bitter truth. Instead of lunch, she had picked up tea and spent the afternoon at his house, where they watched TV and had sex. Finally, I had my vindication. Oddly, I didn't feel as hurt as I expected. My expectations had been so diminished by her ongoing lack of remorse, blame-shifting, and deceit. Instead, I felt a grim relief at confirming that I wasn't paranoid. This weekend, Ellie had asked what she needed to do to prevent a divorce. I told her simply, "Don't invite other men into our relationship." Yet just 2 days later, she disregarded this. At this point, I don't see the value in confronting her directly or revealing how I uncovered her deceit. Instead, I plan to stay low for a few days and then retreat to a friend's house after work on Friday, staying away until at least Monday. I'll text her my intentions that Friday afternoon, giving her no opportunity to sway me with her manipulations. I'm also considering blocking her to ensure a peaceful break. Furthermore, I think it's time to correct the narrative with her family, her sister and father, who so far only know her version of the story, where she claims everything was just an online fantasy. I plan to inform them of the truth. I intend to send a message along the lines of, "I'm sorry to inform you that Naeem has been lying to me and to you all along. She met Naeem on Tuesday and had sex with him despite our attempts to reconcile. I will be initiating a divorce. Thank you for welcoming me into your family and for your past kindnesses. Please support her and the kids through whatever follows. Have a nice life." I need to reclaim some control over how this situation is perceived, especially by those closest to us. I can honestly say I tried sincerely, despite my reservations. Ellie herself has even remarked to her friends that things were improving between us, and yet, she reverted to her old ways. Any responsibility I previously felt for her actions has evaporated. I committed to reconciliation, and she did not. This time, the failure is entirely on her, and I am done. After all that has transpired, I have resolved that there will be no further efforts on my part to salvage our relationship. Ellie has conclusively shown that she is simply not worth the emotional investment. I doubt she will play fair, especially given her father's outdated and biased views on divorce. He's already voiced that if we split, I should be the one to leave the house, and that I would be responsible for her legal fees, a notion firmly stuck in the past. Moreover, her friends have begun to paint me as potentially violent, despite my clean record, simply because I own firearms and because of the narrative Ellie has spun to them. To preempt any potential accusations, I've removed all firearms from our house, storing them securely with a friend. The plan is to quietly prepare, consulting a lawyer to ensure that when I make my move, it's decisive and legally fortified. I'm done playing games. It's time to end this chapter of my life and begin anew, with my dignity intact.